And I think there's a belief in Washington that the prime minister of Pakistan is less important than the state itself and the military establishment, so to speak. So I think there was a suspicion of Pakistan and the military establishment more than Imran Khan himself, although Imran Khan was sort of seen as a wild card by the foreign policy. I think it was a misstep not to have that phone call. My gut sense is that President Biden overlooked it. It wasn't something that was intentional. If you're telling me that the U.S. should treat Pakistan as an important state, well, you're preaching to the choir. I think the U.S. should consistently treat Pakistan as an important state, and I've always said that. And I think this sort of ebb and flow that we have in communication is disappointing and short-sighted. That should be a wake-up call for those who are in the audience. Of course, the United States talks about democracy when it's talking about its perceived adversaries, and it doesn't talk about democracy when it comes to its friends and partners. I mean, that's always been the way it is. But I think there's a belief in Washington that the civilian leaders of Pakistan and the politicians are not reliable.
The United States has always worked with Pakistan's military since the 1950s. So when has the US actually tested Pakistan's politicians? When have they ever given them a chance to prove their ability to work as a reliable partner? Welcome, this is Najma Minhas with GVS Dialogue. Today was a very busy day in Washington, D.C. with the Subcommittee on Foreign Affairs of MENA having a congressional hearing on Pakistan and its elections. I'm joined today by Adam Weinstein, a Deputy Director at the Quincy Institute, looking at Middle Eastern affairs and Pakistan and Afghanistan as well. I wanted to get his thoughts on what's happened today at the congressional hearing. And in addition to that, this increasing thought that's been expressed amongst the Pakistani diaspora and in Pakistan as well on Trump's impending presidency and what are the implications for Imran Khan and Pakistan. Adam, thanks so much for joining me today.
Thanks for having me.
Adam, I was very intrigued. I saw a tweet of yours 2 days back where Sher Afzal Khan Marvat, a firebrand leader of the PTI, in a press conference mentioned that, if Trump comes back as president of the United States, things might look different for Pakistan and in particular Imran Khan.
ट्रम्प की अपनी तरजीहात हैं, लेकिन अगर ट्रम्प सदर बनते हैं तो शायद ये जो पाकिस्तान में हो रहा है पीटीआई के साथ इसकी रोकथाम होगी.
And he suggested maybe Imran Khan might be released. And on top of that, you tweeted and said that this is Trump had a superficial relationship with Imran Khan, and his team viewed Pakistan with great suspicion. So I wanted to start off with that. I mean, what do you mean by that?
Well, look, the Trump administration's South Asia strategy was not very friendly to Pakistan, and I think many of his advisors were quite skeptical of Pakistan. Remember, it's not necessarily President Trump who was making the policy. He was being advised. Now, he did seem to have a rapport with Imran Khan, and that might be because he saw Imran Khan and himself, in a sense, both as political outsiders who had become famous in other industries and then entered politics later. So maybe they had some sort of connection on that level. But I don't think that, President
Both
Trump...
of them against the muddy swamp that they're operating in, right? This is the muddy swamp of Washington, D.C. and Islamabad, Imran Khan. So you think that's what he had in common with Imran Khan?
Well, the swamps are different. I mean, perhaps they're both skeptical of technocrats and the administrative state, but I really don't think it went that deep. I think that they just had, in some ways, similar life trajectories.
You said it didn't go very deeply, but Trump has mentioned Imran Khan subsequently several times. Even recently in a campaign rally, he referred to his friend Imran Khan and talked about the call that they had regarding Qasem Soleimani. They had a very positive relationship during the Davos meeting in 2020. And of course, Imran Khan came to the United States subsequently twice at least, and they had a good meetings there as well. So, I mean, why is it that you categorize this as not a particularly good, relationship? I mean, what's the difference between his relationship with Imran Khan and Modi, for example? I mean, Modi was exchanging bear hugs with him as well.
Well, that's precisely my point. I mean, President Trump would shower praise on all sorts of different world leaders, but I'm not sure it actually translated into stronger relationships. I mean, under the Trump presidency, in some ways, US-Pakistan ties were downgraded. And now, don't quote me on this, even though I'm being recorded, I guess. But I think I recall President Trump also claiming that Imran Khan had said that the assassination of Qasem Soleimani was the greatest event of his life, or something up to that end. I find that incredibly hard to believe that Imran Khan would have said that. So I sort of, attach a grain of salt to things that Trump said about his exchanges with Imran Khan or any other world leader.
Right.
But so bottom line is that I think the relationship between Imran Khan and President Trump was fine. I don't know that it translated into a closer US-Pakistan relationship.
Do you think it will translate to, if Trump wins the presidency and becomes president of the United States, do you think that will translate into a better relationship with Imran Khan? Does Imran Khan have a chance of getting out of prison if Trump is the president? Do you think it will relate to that much at least?
Trump is a wild card, so perhaps he might say something to the establishment in Pakistan that perhaps maybe makes them reassess their position regarding Imran Khan. But I think the jailing of Imran Khan is an internal matter in Pakistan, and whether he's released or not is going to depend on those actors inside Pakistan.
What about the fact that you said that his administration was actually suspicious of Imran Khan and Pakistan? I mean, do you think it was that suspicion when Biden came in and didn't make that famous phone call or didn't receive the famous phone call from Imran Khan, which was really a formality? I mean, it happens everywhere in the world. As soon as someone becomes a prime minister, you call them to say congratulations, and yet Biden didn't receive that call from Imran Khan, which later became a huge embarrassment for Prime Minister Imran Khan. I mean, what was going on there? Why did Biden never receive that phone call or never make a phone call?
Well, let me correct myself. I didn't say that the Trump administration was suspicious of Imran Khan, suspicious of Pakistan. And I think there's a belief in Washington that the prime minister of Pakistan is less important than the state itself and the military establishment, so to speak. So I think there was a suspicion of Pakistan and the military establishment more than Imran Khan himself, although Imran Khan was sort of seen as a wild card by the foreign policy establishment.
So you're saying whoever might have been the prime minister of Pakistan, that phone call would never have happened. It doesn't matter if it was Imran Khan or Shehbaz Sharif or Nawaz Sharif or any prime minister.
Well, I just don't know. In terms of Biden not having a phone call with Imran Khan, I don't think it was personal to Imran Khan. If I was a betting man, I would say that it was simply because President Biden was overloaded with other issues, and for some reason it passed him by. And I was critical of it then. I mean, I don't know if I can find the tweet now, but I was very critical of the phone call not happening because it is a formality. Pakistan is an important country. It's an important trading partner with the United States. It's a nuclear state. It's an important security partner. And of course, the cost of not having a phone call with Imran Khan meant that if he took phone calls with future leaders, it almost was as if that phone call would be a political statement or an endorsement of one leader versus another. So it actually led to more controversy than it was worth. I think it was a misstep not to have that phone call. My gut sense is that President Biden overlooked it. It wasn't something that was intentional.
You've used overlooked it and passed him by. I mean, do you not find that surprising? This was the year in which Biden had 6 to 8 week review of the United States leaving Afghanistan. It was a massive foreign policy decision for the United States. How could it pass by him that, Pakistan is going to be the most important and became the crucial country, which actually helped all the evacuees? I mean, the whole international organizations, Westerners in general, Afghan elites, they all went through Islamabad and took flights out of Pakistan. How could that call just pass by Joe Biden? I mean, he wasn't even 82 and, we see how he is now. And at that point, 3 years earlier, he wasn't as bad as he is right now. So, I mean, how does Biden and his team justify not calling probably what was one of the most important countries in their own narrow foreign policy perspective at that point in time?
Well, look, I know some folks might think it was an intentional snub. I find that hard to believe. If you're telling me that the U.S. should treat Pakistan as an important state, well, you're preaching to the choir. I think the U.S. should consistently treat Pakistan as an important state, and I've always said that. And I think this sort of ebb and flow that we have in communication is disappointing and short-sighted. But the irony is that even though Pakistan was helpful with the evacuees and so forth, the withdrawal from Afghanistan, in the view of the foreign policy establishment in Washington, made Pakistan less important. And of course, the withdrawal was chaotic, and then there was the war in Ukraine and so forth. So I really do believe that the Biden administration was overwhelmed and missed the opportunity. Now, I think that verges on foreign policy malpractice, but I don't think it was intentional.
Okay. So what role does Afghanistan play in terms of the United States versus Pakistan perspective? Yes, of course, Pakistan has become less important now because the United States apparently isn't in Afghanistan. But how does Afghanistan play into this relationship between the two countries? And it's an ongoing issue still, right?
Well, it's an ongoing issue insofar as that there's still some Afghans and former interpreters and at-risk Afghans who are in Pakistan that the U.S. wants to get out of Pakistan or out of Afghanistan via Pakistan. It's still an issue insofar as the U.S. is concerned about ISKP and Al-Qaeda and things like that. And of course, Pakistan has a greater ability to communicate with the Taliban, specifically the Emir in Kandahar, than the United States does. And that's partly because Pakistan has informal actors, folks like Taqi Usmani, Fazl Rahman, who can go and speak to the Emir in Kandahar, and the U.S. doesn't have that. So Pakistan is important for that reason. I think Pakistan should be, viewed as important apart from Afghanistan. And I think the thrust of U.S. policy towards Pakistan is in the direction of viewing Pakistan as important on its own and not viewing it through the lens of Afghanistan. But of course, Pakistan is still going to be an important partner in securing U.S. interests in Afghanistan. Right now, Pakistan and the United States sort of have the same problem with the Taliban, which is that we're both working with a very stubborn, intransigent Taliban who are not easy to persuade.
You tweeted this morning, I saw it, there was a quote tweet on top of Dr. Shireen Bangish, who said that Ambassador Bloom met with General Asim and suggested to him that everything will be sorted out in the next 6 weeks. And you said that with all due respect, the actual pressure from US lawmakers is minimal, and this isn't how US foreign policy is formulated and carried out. What is it you were referring to there?
Well, look, U.S. policy towards concerning Pakistan is formulated in the White House and the National Security Council, not by the ambassador. Now, the ambassador might give his thoughts and inform the policy process, but that's not, the ambassador is not crafting the policy. The ambassador is helping to carry out the policy. And insofar as pressure by lawmakers, look, I know lawmakers have had some very strong tweets. There was the hearing today. There's been letters and so forth. But that doesn't necessarily translate into a sustained pressure campaign on the Biden administration to change its stance towards the Pakistani military. I just don't see that pressure. I know that there has been some lobbying efforts and that there's grassroots activism from PTI supporters who are Pakistani Americans. And of course, that kind of organizing is a crucial part of U.S. democracy, and it has some effect. I just don't think it has a strong enough effect to alter the relationship. And you saw that in the hearing today. What did Don Liu say were the three U.S. priorities for Pakistan? Number one is terrorism. Number two is a stable economy. And I think number three was people-to-people ties. They weren't talking about democracy because Washington doesn't think that it can really affect the civil-military balance in Pakistan, nor is it necessarily a top priority for Washington.
Do you not feel that's ironic for the so-called champion of democracy in the world? I mean, whenever we hear of China and Hong Kong, whenever we hear of Putin and Russia, we hear the words democracy. Navalny, who just passed away, a week, 10 days ago or so, we kept hearing about this opposition leader in this undemocratic country called Russia. How do they justify that then? I mean, as you've said, this is one of the things that surprised the Pakistanis present today at the congressional hearings. There was less discussion on democracy and the so-called hearings were supposed to be on democracy and more about China and Iran and women's rights in terms of microfinance. I mean, do they have the right to make money, and how are they making money? I mean, how did that come up in a conversation on democracy? And what didn't come up was enough about internet suppression or Twitter being banned for over 1 month, or even those women who were in prisons for over a year, which has never happened in Pakistan.
Well, look, my pitch for microfinance, by the way, would be that helped Bangladesh improve its economy. And I think Pakistan could follow the same model so far as textiles. And I think that would be a great opportunity for Pakistan. But to answer your question, I mean, that should be a wake-up call for those who are in the audience. Of course, the United States talks about democracy when it's talking about its perceived adversaries, and it doesn't talk about democracy when it comes to its friends and partners. I mean, that's always been the way it is.
We have said publicly and privately that we want to see transparent and credible investigation of election irregularities. We have called for accountability for mass detentions of people in the opposition, and we have said loudly and clearly that military trials for civilians accused of crimes after May 9th is not in keeping with international norms.
So you're saying because Pakistan is an ally, the United States would rather work with the status quo, which is the military, rather than Pakistan's people or Pakistan, the elected government that the Pakistani people may have wanted?
Well, yeah, I think there's a lot of truth to that, if I'm being blunt. And I also think there's a perception, and I think it's true, that Pakistan's civilian politicians themselves will work with the military when it's advantageous for them. And then when it's not advantageous for them, they'll challenge the military. But I think there's a belief in Washington that the civilian leaders of Pakistan and the politicians are not reliable. And so when's the
US ever used them and tested them for their reliability?
Sorry?
When has the US tested them for their reliability? I mean, the United States has always worked with Pakistan's military since the 1950s. So when has the US actually tested Pakistan's politicians? When have they ever given them a chance to prove their ability to work as a reliable partner?
Look, I think that's a fair criticism of the history of US foreign policy towards Pakistan. And in some ways, you might be able to argue, and it's not an unfair argument, that the United States has undermined civilian-led politics in Pakistan. But at the same time, the realpolitik calculation is that the Pakistani military drives foreign policy. And so the United States has to work with the country as it exists, not as it ought to exist, perhaps.
What were your thoughts on the congressional hearings today? Did you feel that Donald Lu was asked any tough questions?
I mean, I think some of the questions tried to corner him into taking a stance on whether elections should be reheld or not, although I don't think that's even a possibility. So, and I think there were questions that about the fairness of the election, in which I guess I would say that Don Lu was trying hard to not endorse the fairness of the election, but not criticize it too much.
Do you believe that the recent election was free and fair?
Sir, we have never used the term free and fair in the characterization of this election.
To what level, then, would you say interference happened?
Sir, we have expressed, and I've said this multiple times today, serious concerns about the pre-election environment, violence that occurred.
Do you think Islamabad should get worried by some of those comments on the elections being held again by Donald Lu? Or
no, I don't think so, because I mean, what do you mean by Islamabad? Do you mean the government that's in power? Do you mean the
government of Pakistan, the military?
No, I don't think they should be worried. I don't think the U.S. has the power or the desire to rehold elections in Pakistan. I think what should worry the establishment is that every time Pakistan is in the news and every time Pakistan is being discussed in major capitals around the world, it's for negative reasons. I mean, look at the attack on Gwadar today. You don't think that's going to alienate China and China's investment in Pakistan? It's the most dangerous country for overseas Chinese workers in the world. So I think what should worry the Pakistani establishment and the Pakistani government is Pakistan is constantly in the headlines for negative reasons. And much of that is self-inflicted. I mean, some of it's not self-inflicted, some of it's circumstantial, some of it's the location of Pakistan in a very volatile region. But some of it is self-inflicted, and it's not good for business. It's not good for investment. It's not good for human development. And I don't have any joy in saying these things. I think Pakistan has great potential, but it can't. It's not good for that. That potential can't be realized when you have terrorist attacks in Gwadar, and the discussion in Washington D.C. today is whether the election was fair or not.
Right. China and Iran came up quite a lot during these congressional hearings. In fact, it was a bit surprising because, once again, the hearing was supposed to be about democracy, but we heard about Pakistan's relationship with China. To what extent does that play a part in how United States perceives Pakistan?
Well, congressional hearings have their titles, and then they become about whatever the lawmakers want them to be about. It's not uncommon for lawmakers to talk about things that have nothing to do with the hearing.
Okay.
Being the politicians that they are. About China, I think the United States does view Pakistan through the lens of U.S.-China competition to some degree, although many folks think that Pakistan is so far in the camp of China that it's not worth trying to maintain a balance. I think that's short-sighted. I think the U.S. should be concerned about Pakistan falling too far into China's camp. I think what's good for Pakistan and what's good for the United States, and frankly, what's good for China, is for Pakistan to have a healthy relationship with both China and the United States. And actually, even though I'm not naive enough to think that competition won't take place, Chinese and U.S. interests in Pakistan are not necessarily misaligned. I mean, both countries want to see terrorism reduced. Both countries want to see economic and political stability. And I think sometimes the focus on China's ambitions in Gwadar are a bit overhyped. Of course, Pakistan is buying more military, weapons and aircraft from China, but that's also because the United States isn't willing to supply Pakistan. So some of this is a case of, and same for the infrastructure. I mean, China's investing in infrastructure, but that's also because the United States doesn't like to get involved in infrastructure development. So if Washington won't do it, Beijing will. And so it's as simple as that.
So you say that these congressional hearings won't make a huge difference in terms of how policy is conducted between the United States and any country in general, but between the United States and Pakistan in this case. What needs to happen then? What does the diaspora need to do, which will make some kind of impact in U.S. thinking?
Well, look, the diaspora itself is diverse, so I don't know if the diaspora have one view, but diaspora and I don't know if it's appropriate for me to advise the diaspora how to affect U.S. foreign policy, but I'll give a general answer. Diasporas that are able to have an effect on policy tend to build grassroots networks. They tend to understand the way foreign policy is developed in Washington. They form organizations and they're organized, and this isn't something that happens overnight.
Right. So it'll take time.
It's really not accomplished by, trying to shout over a State Department official in a hearing. I mean, I'm sorry to say, but that's not how you affect change for the most part. I do think protests like that does have a place. And of course, I'm not criticizing it because it's a key part of our democracy. I believe in the right of protest and to express oneself. But in terms of trying to affect actual change, I don't think that's a winning strategy.
Adam, thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you for having me.